What is happening, everybody? I'm Greg with Redbeard's Garage, and this is a Predator 420 from Harbor Freight. This is the non-Hemi, and you can check out the video linked up in the corner of the difference between a Hemi and a non-Hemi 420, but that's not what we're talking about today. Everybody's asked me, you know, these was made for log splitters, generators, and stuff like that, so we're pushing them beyond their limits, of course. And that's why we have to upgrade to things like billet rod and a billet flywheel, because these are splash lubricated engines. So I've always wanted to put an oil filter and oil cooler on one of these engines, because I think it would just, for one, it'd be cool just to try it out. Do I think it's really necessary? In the very, very long run, it would be. We've beat on these engines a lot and we've never had one blow. So do I think it's necessary? I do, if you want to get you know, thousands of hours out of this thing, revving it to $5 grand. So how we're going to achieve this today is I went and got a 350 Chevy. Like this is, it's for anything really, but this filter is for a 350 Chevy. This is a filter relocating kit. So you can buy these and mount your filter under your hood, so when you do an oil change, it's simple to get to. So I bought one of these and adapted it down to, I think this is 3/8 hose with some barbs. So now we can mount this on our engine or on our go-kart and have a filter. And then we have a cooler off of a 670 Predator. You can buy these for a GX 670, which is the Honda variant of the V-twins. And we did the same thing to it as well. We necked it down to 3/8 hose barbs. Then we have a small gasoline filter. The only reason we're running this is to see if oil is moving. You know, this will be our sight glass pretty much. Then a couple more things we have. We have a check valve. This only lets liquid or air one way in it. So it'll allow it this way, but it will not the other. So what that'll do is when we run all of our hoses, it'll keep it from back feeding all the oil. So when you start it, this pump will not be dry. And that goes on to the next thing, our pump. This is a small fuel or oil pump you can get off Amazon. These things are dirt cheap and they do a pretty good job. I think they're a high volume, low pressure. So they don't make like a ton of pressure, but they'll move a lot of volume. And it has, it looks like 1/4 inch or 3/8 hose barbs on it. So everything will hook up really nice. And the last thing is how we're gonna hook it all up to the engine. So I found you can buy in the links down below, we'll link all this stuff, but you can get a oil drain hose for these engines. And this is what it looks like. It threads right here in the block and it allows you to have a line. You know, if this is in the frame of a go-kart, you don't want to spill oil everywhere, and you can drain your engine that way. Well, I took an old one and I cut this crimp off of it, and this is what was in there. So it gave me a perfect nipple to put right here on the oil drain. And these engines have a ton of sediment that sits down on the bottom when they're new, so that's the best place for this. So we'll have our barb sitting there. This barb will run into our oil filter, out of the filter, and this is in and out. By the way, there's a certain way to run this. So we'll run in from the engine, out from this, into the cooler, out from the cooler, to the pump, from the pump, back into the engine. Everything that comes out will be filtered first before running through this and running through this. So that's just going to allow us to know that we got clean oil and not clogging that stuff up with junk. So we're starting with a brand new Predator. These are about $400. I love to figure out stupid stuff on these engines. It's fun to me to do this. Yes, you can buy a 4-wheeler engine and have more power, have all this stuff, but half the fun in this stuff is figuring things out that wasn't supposed to do what we're making them do. So that's the reason we're trying this. So we're going to get into it, start taking stuff apart and adapting all this stuff on there. And we are going to need a power source. This engine will not put out enough power to run this, and we'll show you how we're going to combat that issue later in the video. All right, so the only real thing we got to remove is the gas tank, because we have a Go Power Sports throttle plate. This is used if you're removing the governor. This will give you back the throttle mechanism that you're going to lose when you remove the governor. We're not necessarily using it for that in this video. We're going to keep this governor for this video, but we want to mount this where that gas tank goes to give us a spot to mount stuff like our filter and our pump, and it'll all look clean. And the only thing that'll go on the chassis would be like the cooler, because there's no good place to put this on here. So we got 10 mil on each side of it. And they cross-thread all of them? Yes, they did. Use a 13 on the rear nuts holding the the bolts that's in the back of the gas tank. There we go. And we're going to have a gas line under this. So once we pull this up, the stiffness. And I'm not going to keep this gas tank because of them, you know, cross threading those from factory. But we will keep the lid. I added thread inserts in this Go Power Sports plate. It makes it a lot easier. If you don't have one of these, it'll use a nut and a bolt, but it just makes it easier on these back holes when laying this on here. This is how that thing sits on there, and it just helps it, makes it a little easier. All right, so we've marked out our holes, and I've put little drill holes right there. This will sit there, and the pump will sit right there side by side. So it'll come in from the engine here and then come out right into this, and then I don't know where we'll put our little check valve, probably in this line, in the, you know, because it's going to keep anything from backing up from this point on. We have to have a return for the oil, and I may actually have one of these on another engine and take it off and cut it. We'll drill these. I'm starting with a 1/4 inch bit, and then I'm going to step up to around 3/8. Now we can take our thread riveter. These things are ultra handy. Links are always in our Amazon affiliate links. They help us out if you use those. Set them down in that hole, and we squeeze the dickens out of it, and that gives us a threaded hole, so we don't have to worry about using a nut on the bottom side. Alright, so we have all of our thread inserts. We got our pump mounted, and now we're mounting our oil filter. And the best thing about this is just a Napa oil filter. It's a 21348. And I think I got the oil filter relocating little thing off of Amazon. The biggest issue with this whole setup is providing power to the pump. And if you're on like a few hour ride, you're going to need a pretty decent sized battery to run it and lights and stuff. So we're going to be running this off of a Milwaukee 6 amp hour M12 battery, and because we don't have enough charging system, this charging system's garbage. All these are. But what we can do is we can later upgrade to an alternator. So stay tuned. The next video will be how to mount up an alternator on one of these engines, and we may mount the alternator here to line it up with the crankshaft and do a bracket where we can tighten it, and then we'll have to mount this stuff in a different location. But we're just doing this for this. We'll run this off a battery for now just to see if it works, and you know, for testing purposes. It's gonna have a little oil in it. Clark, what we can do is stand it up like this, slide a hammer under it. Bam, no more leaking Chinese oil. I'm going to put a copper crush washer on this just to make sure it seals really nice, and we're not going to use anything on the threads, just the copper crush washer. Like that. We just need to make sure we allow it to be centered. That's going to be probably a 14 mil, somewhere around that. Alright, so that will be sealed really nice, Clark. I think this is 1/4. We keep a ton of hose around here. Beggar being one of them. Oh. Did you see that coming?
Yes.
Colin! I keep my stuff organized very, very well. So nice, you can see it twice. Oh man. Milwaukee, if I wasn't already married, watch out. I'm just gonna freaking force the crap out of this. You know, a smart man would be like, hey, why don't you just change those barbs out to 1/4 inch? Would you mind your own business? I didn't get a engineering degree at Harvard Law. It was a discount system.
I thought you were going to say Harbor Freight.
Well, that too. I know this is going to work. It's just, do you want to go? I like having little trinkets on stuff. You know what I mean? Having all kinds of junk you don't need on these engines.
Makes it look cooler.
Yeah, it's like, dang, cuz, what's that? And I'm like, it's just a coffee pot craft. Cut that down. We want the arrow pointing up. Should we put clamps on this too? Okay. Bam. And we can, ooh, well, let's make it classy. So we have one of these stainless soft clamps. These things are a lifesaver. Bam. Oh yeah, that's the way we want it. So there we have the cooler hooked up, and of course we left long hoses so we could mount it on a chassis later, but we're not going to do that for this video. So we have a barb in each side. One, this is return in the front, so it's just going to blow it back into the valley of the block. And well, first we need to put oil in it, and I want to overfill it because we got to fill all this stuff up. We're using synthetic wool, which I hate to waste synthetic oil on this test, but you know, we'll see what happens. All right, that's over probably 3/4 of a 1 3/4 quarts. The hell is that? So this allows you to take a M12 Milwaukee battery. You can buy these for DeWalt, anything, but the reason I like the M12 is because it's 12 volts. If you go to M18, it's 18 volt. And this pump is made to run off 12 volt. But we can put a big battery in here and just set this aside for now. And I'm gonna use some real quick crimp buoys on these. So we're looking for any oil leaks. Come on, baby. Come on. It's gonna take a minute. It's pumping a lot of oil. Cause oh dog, that's sick. It's getting the air out. It's gonna purge it. It's got to fill this up. That's freaking cool, dog. See the pump squatting down now? We're still getting air out of the system. We're getting it. We're doing it. That's cool. I'm leaking any oils? I don't think so. Can you spin the engine? So, your boy has successfully did a filtered and cooled 420. You know how long I've had these parts sitting on the shelf? It is freaking sweet when you get something done and it works. Well, I mean, it works for sure. I mean, that's proof that it works. Easy. Don't pour out on me. Is it sitting right there?
Yep.
Hey.
Perfect.
So with this setup, depending on line length, you're going to need to overfill it a 1/2 quart. Basically, these take 1 1/4 quarts. I put 1 3/4 ish roundabouts. You can see what's left over, and let's put the lid on this so we don't knock it over. That is awesome, though. I'm really excited. What's going to be even more exciting is when I mount the alternator on this, and it can power itself off the engine. That's going to be cool. So this is our Ghetto setup. We have these 420s bolted to a piece of wood. The piece of wood is clamped on each side, so hopefully nothing falls over. We have a gravity fed gas tank up on top of Grayson's go-kart feeding this engine. That's probably a 1/2 gallon, which should be fine to let it run like at idle, a little over, for an hour. This is a bone stock 420. We just pulled them both out of the box. The only modification to this one is the oil filtration and cooling system. Going to be running it off a 9 amp hour knockoff Milwaukee battery. Should run it for an hour. I would imagine that's a pretty low draw pump. Went to Harbor Freight and bought an infrared thermometer. So what we can do is we can test the block. It is reading, and it's super hot out here. It's reading 95, reading 95, 98, little hotter. Like I said, these have been in the sun. Well, also, not that it's going to matter that much, we're going to shoot the head on the test. So right now, we're gonna say they're both 95 because that seems to be, I've checked them a couple times. We're gonna run these things and see what happens. I'm actually gonna move this gas line because it is on that, and that oil gets pretty hot. And we've mounted our cooler to this piece of wood, and I'm gonna have my Milwaukee fan blowing through it to simulate driving. Of course, we can get a fan for like a PC and put on this, but we don't have one right now. I have a 120 millimeter, but it's going to take a smaller one to fit that radiator. So let's get this set up going. So our starting temperature is 90 on the one without the cooler, 90 as well for that one. So I'm going to start this one first.
A few moments later.
All right, so this ran for 45 minutes before this small fuel tank ran out of gas. So we just shut them off. We'll shut this one off. And the oil cooler is reading 128 degrees. So let's check side covers of each engine. Starting with the engine that was not cooled. Get away from me, B. 128 degrees on that side cover. The head is 206. 124 and 206. No, whoa. Yeah, 206. It jumps around. So head, I didn't expect the head because it's not a cooled head. You know, the temperature is going to be in the block. Let's check lower on the block. 134.1. We're at 129.8. Our oil cooler is reading 130 degrees. That seems about right. So 150, our oil filter is 150. Few degrees difference, but the cooling's not the biggest factor. And we just got this Milwaukee fan blown across it, which is a pretty good, you know, that's probably like 15-20 mile an hour, I would think, like simulation of cruising 15-20 mile an hour. But the biggest deal is the filtration system, and we can see through the sight glass the quality of our oil, so that's going to be huge. How will the pump hold up? Oh, that fuel pump's extremely hot. I mean, it is to the touch. It's 120 degrees, which it's baking in the sun as well. You know, get out of here. So yeah, and it's hot out here. It is crazy hot. So not a huge temperature to change,
but it works.
But it works, yeah, and it works very well. So all right guys, so you've seen the results. Not a massive difference when we checked the temperature on the actual crankcase. There was like a 6 degrees difference between the two. We did check them several times because that Harbor Freight gun seems to jump around a little bit. But after looking at the footage and testing it, the biggest difference was if you check the temperature of the oil filter, which that's the first thing in line from the engine, it was running 150 degrees. By the time the oil came out of the actual cooler, it was dropping 30 to 40 degrees. That's a huge difference. 6 degrees isn't nothing to mess with this kit over, but when we're talking 30 to 40 degrees from the oil entering the filter from exiting the cooler, that's massive. I mean, that's huge differences. And the cooler you can make your engine run, of course, the more power it's going to be able to put out. So that is awesome that we was able to drop 30 to 40 degrees from, you know, filling or checking this oil filter and then checking the cooler. Now I know a lot of you guys are not going to want to go through this headache of adding all these parts, but this is a relatively cheap kit to put on. Everything is linked in the video's description. You can find all of our stuff. Those links do help us to continue to do these videos. This stuff is super fun to me to figure out how to make these engines better and better. This engine will be getting a 308 cam billet rod, billet flywheel, a ported and milled head, and a 34 millimeter Mikuni. All those parts will also be linked down below. Go Power Sports has a ton of stuff for this, and we can't wait to try this kit out on an actual buggy. Now I wouldn't put this kit on a yard cart or anything because it's not really necessary for something like that, but a big buggy, I think it'll be awesome. with an alternator running, and getting this stuff off the engine is going to allow a lot of heat from the engine to get away from it as well. So we could see even better numbers after really thrashing on this thing. So guys, let us know what you think about this video. I thought it was super fun to make. Like I said, I love doing little things like this, putting stuff on these engines. Yeah, you can buy a four-wheeler motorcycle engine. This is what brings me joy and excites me to come out in the garage and work on stuff, is figuring out really weird little setups like this. So we'll be continuing to do more. We're going to show you how to mount an alternator, one of these small mini drag alternators off of eBay or Amazon. Also will be linked down below. Show you how to mount one of these up so you can get up to they make those alternators all the way up to 100 amps. So we'll be putting a full charging system on it, building this engine up. So stay tuned on the channel. We'll try this thing out on a buggy. Thank you guys so much for watching. We love you and God bless.